Welcome to the Narrative Podcast.
Hey everyone.
My name is Isaiah.
And I'm Brandon.
And I get the opportunity to do something I've wanted to do for a very long time.
I still can't I don't believe, me and Lindsay were just talking about this. I literally don't believe that you don't know anything about my missions.
Not a thing. And I realize I don't know anything about other people's missions.
Because what makes this bizarre is the fact that I walk around and I tell people you're my best friend.
Yeah.
But you don't know anything about me as a missionary.
Don't do this. There's so many things that we haven't got the opportunity to just sit down and just tell me everything. Yeah. That's what's cool about this platform is we get to do that.
It's just like, man, I love when I'm around you. I just love to be with you.
Yeah.
But when we're serious, it's always about the Lord. It's never about like what he did. It's always about what he's doing or who he is. And that's one thing that I've always loved about our relationship. Yeah. So this just kind of forces us to interview each other and to hear. Yeah.
And what was cool, well, I guess not cool, what was like unique about our relationship is we started being friends and then your family had a tragedy.
Yeah. And
then right after that, I ran into some difficulties of my own as well. So we haven't really we know each other deeply, but we haven't been able to hey, I'm just bored. Just tell me about all these kind of things.
Yeah, it was almost like we were brought together for trauma for a little while, or like insurance kind of like we need each other to
It's like being best friends with an insurance agent. Yeah. It's like, oh, we've been brought together. So anyways, let me stay focused. I don't know anything about your missions. Talk to me from the beginning. Hit me with when did you first do missions? How many years ago was that?
Wow, man, that is okay. So I started doing missions with, I was a youth pastor. No, wow. It was way before then because technically my first short-term mission was with Celebration Church. We went to LA.
Cool.
And
this was right after you had this radical salvation.
Oh, this was 3-4 months in. It was this whole thing. It was like a whole thing. And I ended up going on this trip and then we went to a dream center and I was like, wow, man, this is incredible. And then the leadership that took us was just so radical and man, they were just so intentional about everything they did and just watching them. I was like, man, this is really cool. And when I came back, I remember I kind of was in the city and I was hearing about a lot of kids ministry stuff
in
Jacksonville. Yeah. Right. And I remember hearing about a lot of opportunity for kids ministry. And I was like, man, I'm really passionate about kids, which is really interesting. A side story is, man, before I knew the Lord, one thing that I'll always say is I hate people and I hate kids.
Yeah.
I used to say that. I don't know why. I just did. I was just a very angry person. And then
just defense mechanism.
Yeah. And when I was saved, my language changed to I hate people and I hate kids. So I love people and I love kids.
Yeah.
And that's really one of the things that God's used in my life. In a huge way is I love people so deeply that it sometimes gets me in trouble. And so I remember just hearing about this kids ministry and I was like, man, I love kids. So why not? You know? And anyway, I took one of the flyers and I ended up calling the number that was on there. And sure enough, it was Kim Bogart, who runs an organization here in town called Kim's Open Door, excuse me. And I showed up randomly, man. It was there was, I think,
showed up.
Yeah, I think there was 300 refugees. There was probably 50 volunteers.
So I didn't catch it. What year is this?
2016.
Okay.
And I was like, whoa, this is way too many people for me. I'm probably not even going to be needed. Well, I walked up and then she immediately introduced herself to me.
Because a strange man approached her ministry.
Yeah. She was like, who is this? And then I was like, I saw your flyer about some kind of event that's happening here today. I know you don't know me. This is my name. And then she was like, honey, you are more than welcome to be here. She was like, you are an angel from heaven. And I was like, okay.
If you know Kim, you know this is this is classic Kim.
Yeah. And she was like, I need strong men like you. I need you here. And I was like, okay, so I just sat down, I listened to her spiel about who Kim's Open Door was, man, and I fell in love. She casted vision on why she went into ministry, why she quit her 9-to-5 job, making, a lot of money. And she was stable in education, and why she quit that is because a girl here locally got shot. a little girl, and she remembers turning on the news and she saw it, and she went home and she told her husband, like, babe, I'm quitting my job. I'm starting a ministry where these kids can have a place to go. These, children after school, and, these programs that they need to be in and stuff. So it was just I heard the passion in it, and I felt the Lord in it. So I just pursued it, and I started doing it at high capacity. I've worked for, on and off, man, up until the last 2 years, that from 2016 to 2021.
How old were you when you first started with this ministry in 2016? How old were you?
24.
Okay.
No. Yeah. 24.
Cool.
24. So, man, like I said, I hit it hard, and I started serving with her. And I've worked for her on and off for, the last, 7 years, I think probably 5 or 6 times, just as needed kind of thing, where she'll call me and say, hey, I have this program I want to do or whatever. And if it works, it works. But, and then shortly after that, she probably about 2 years in, she invited me to go to Kenya. Okay. And I was like, no, I'm not that guy.
Did you have a passport or anything at the time?
Nothing. So Kim that's why I call her like my spiritual mom.
Yeah.
Because she's the one that really, oh, you don't have a passport? Like, we'll get it. Like, gotta provide. And at that point I was living in my car. So I was essentially a homeless guy that was just well dressed, so she really just kind of took me in and taught me a lot. So she spoke in my life a lot, got me a passport, all those things. And then I ended up getting a house to live in and found a roommate, all those things. Awesome. And then I went to Kenya, changed my life.
How long were you in Kenya?
We were in Kenya that first trip for almost 3 weeks. It was like 16 days, 17 days with travel.
Yeah.
And
what about that trip changed your life?
Oh, that's so hard, man.
I told you we're going to have a second episode.
Yeah. What changed my life about that episode?
The episode?
Or about that trip,
mission.
I'm sorry. Yeah, about that mission, sorry. Is, you said episode, so it threw me off. That mission changed my life for so many reasons. First of all, I'd never been, my first time out of, other than, the places that I moved growing up, because my dad was in the military, which was places like, Oklahoma, Indiana, Ohio, and Florida, right? Yeah. Those are we bounced back and forth all of those places my entire life. So I had never really been anywhere else. I didn't know that America was different. So when I went to LA, I was like, whoa, this is way different than Florida. Yeah. This is way different than any other place I've ever been. So traveling 28 hours away, what is that, 13,000 miles or something? Probably even further.
Yeah.
Literally across the world, to see that there's actually functioning and breathing people that are lowly and so in need, but also so amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there's people operating like this in the world, because if you don't go, then you don't know. Yeah. That's what Kim used to always say. So and good. I remember that when we landed, I just remember seeing just the way that people interacted, the way that people were, the way that they saw us. Yeah. But what really changed my life was Kim asked me to, what was it? Was it the first time we spoke? Anyway, she asked me she has a thing called the gospel bag. Okay. And what it is she made it up, and it's a bunch of stuffed animals, and not stuffed animals, stuffed items that present the gospel. And you take them out of the bag one at a time, and you present the gospel in order. So it's Genesis to Revelation, but it's very fast. It's like a 6 to 8 minute gospel presentation. Mm-hmm. And it's like a whole production for kids. They go nuts over it, man. It's crazy. And she asked me if I wanted to present it
in Kenya
with a translator. And I was like, 1000% yes, because this is what I did. This is what I've been doing for her for a year and a half, is just doing it all over Jacksonville. So I was very familiar with it. And I remember just being so nervous. This is the first time that I ever really did.
It's super nerve-wracking at first.
Yes. And especially in a different nation, it's way different. And I remember getting up there, and I could not remember anything. I couldn't remember anything. And so she was looking at me, and she knew Like she
you
knew
were panicking.
She knew I was panicking. She did. That's why she wanted me to get the opportunity to like get those jitters out. And she knew. She always told me, she was like, honey, you're a missionary. Like you're a missionary. There's people that are called to go to missions and do those short terms, but like you are a missionary.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was so unique. Yeah.
Like, this way.
Right. Yeah. You know? And so in that moment I was panicking and I looked down at her and she didn't do anything. She just sat there. Like she just thought I was looking at her or whatever. And so I closed my eyes. I literally did this on stage. I'm not kidding. I remember it. It was like I was in the movie Timeless where everything slowed down and I had just a panic. And I closed my eyes and I remember I just said, Lord, I need to remember all of these words.
That's good.
And next thing I know, I open my eyes and then I blink. I'm not kidding. I blink and I'm done.
That's awesome.
And the kids are like going nuts. And the next thing I know, I'm doing an altar call in Kenya. And then like kids are coming, wanting to be prayed for. Out. Yeah. And I don't remember the presentation at all. And then I asked Kim later that day, she was like, you did great because that's what you're called to do. And
she's acting like it's nothing.
Yeah. Like she knew all along, but that's how she is too. But so it really empowered me in that moment because I was seeing kids just receive like the gospel. It wasn't like they weren't coming up because they wanted to be healed. That's great. Sure. They weren't coming up because they needed financial gain. That's great. Sure. They were coming up because the simple gospel message of Jesus was presented and it was convicting to them and they needed it so bad that they were coming forth.
Yeah.
And that's what just in that moment, it was just so powerful amongst so many other things.
I think whenever you leave the country for the first time, doing a short-term mission or whatever else, but specifically with doing a short-term mission, the first time you see people in other places respond to the gospel, it's life-changing. Yeah. Because here in the States, we see it on average. I mean, on billboards, radios, just people, probably a couple hundred times a year. But there's people in other places that have never heard this. And I've heard stories from missionaries where they share the gospel and then the people look at them really angry and they're like, what took you so long? And it's like, it like cuts you to the core where you're like, what took me so long?
Yeah. That's one thing that Kim would always tell whenever we would go to a different nation together. When she would take me, I'm just framing Kim right now. I'm using her as reference just because she's such a high capacity at the first, 7 years of my missional life. So she would always say, whenever we would go to a different nation, she would always look at the people like huge congregations, masses, which is not her thing. We just somehow end up in these random rooms, like congregations where there'd be like 600 people there, whether it be kids or whatever. But she would always tell people, she'd always look at them like, you think that you're blessed that I'm here. But the reality of it is that I'm blessed to be here. And God sent me here because I needed you. And it's so, if you hear someone say that to people and you watch their reaction, they're shocked. They're just shocked. Because they're like, no, we're blessed because you're here. So to hear someone else that's coming from America say, no, I'm blessed because I'm here with you. Like, you don't understand what you're doing for my soul too. It changes you and it changes the idea of what you're about when you're there,
Yeah.
So
that's good. So that's Kenya. What happened after Kenya?
So after Kenya, thank you, by the way, for that.
You're good.
So after Kenya, we come back and then
back to the States.
Yes, we come back to Jacksonville. And then I worked with her for a little bit longer. We did I think it was an Asia tour around, it was called Broadway Club. And we would just travel all around Jacksonville and do productions. And we would just like talk about Asia. We would perform shows for kids. We would do production for Milan. Like it was just all about Asia. And I was like, man, I want to go to Asia. But you felt like you
already had a heart for Asia before this.
Yeah, I've had a heart for China. Throw that pin in there, China. I love Asia, all of Asia. However, my pinpoint passion is China. And ever since I was a child, the reason why is because my dad he has an 8th degree black belt in Taekwondo. And he's also trained in 8th degree.
Can you have that many?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think. Yeah, eighth
He probably
degree.
just told you that, like, I'm an 8th degree
I
flight.
hope he didn't just tell me that. If I'm wrong and there's someone on here, please comment and let me know.
Let us know.
That shouldn't be a lie. My dad
should
is
have
not a
Googled
liar
that
like
first.
that. So yeah, and then he also has training in kung fu. So
Dang.
with the training in kung fu, he loved Bruce Lee growing up,
Yeah.
and then that's actually who I'm named after is Brandon Lee, his son.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
my original name was supposed to be Brandon Lee Rossi, and then my mom hated the name Lee. So then my dad was like, "Well, what's an alternative name that we can meet in the middle?" And she was like, "Well, my favorite jeans are Levi." So that's how I got the name Levi. So it kind of is in the between the Levi and the Lee thing. So
yeah.
ever since I found out when I grew up and I was old enough to know like Brandon Lee, like, you know, and I just was like, wow, Bruce Lee, like there's something there. And then I would always watch Kung Fu videos and all those things.
And with your dad learning these martial arts, when you learn something, you get embedded in the culture.
Very
you
much.
really do. Same with language learning. You become a part of the culture. You think like they think because you learn to communicate like they communicate.
Yep.
So
yeah,
it sounds like from a young age, this is something that the Lord was working in you.
100%.
Whether you knew it or not, whether your dad knew it or not, the Lord was working this from the beginning.
Exactly. So China for a long time. So, and then, you know, we went on that tour for the Broadway Club, and I just remember all of it sparked back up in me. Kim started asking me to take lead roles for China-specific jobs, and I was like, man, I really...
Still within Jacksonville.
Within Jacksonville. Yeah, just for the Broadway Club that we were doing, that little mini tour we were doing here in Jacksonville. And then she... when she was asking me to do these, I just started getting like this passion for it. And then I asked her, I said, we should go to China. And she was like, well, I don't have anything lined up for that, but do you want to go to India? And I was like, sure.
Close enough.
Yeah, I'll go to India. So I ended up going to India. We went there for 2 weeks. And then Suresh changed my life. Again, Suresh was just incredible. He's one of our hosts. He's an artist there.
Suresh was a host in India.
Yes, host in India, in Hyderabad, which is Kim Bogart. She supports him highly. She started, I think, 2 CRCs with him, which are children's resource centers there. And amongst so many other things, him preaching the gospel to thousands every summer. He travels all over Hyderabad to do a mini tour for just gospel. They sleep in their car. They don't have food for days. They don't shower. They don't have, that's how much sacrifice they give toward that ministry. And she loves that because that's kind of who she is, you know, the sacrifice there. So I saw that in person and I was like, wow, this is incredible. And then the following year was China. The first time that I went there with her, that was a very short trip. That was an 8-day trip.
I missed what you said for a second. You said that you, after India, then you went straight to China from there, or you came back?
That was the following year.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, my first trip to China was the following year.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then we were there for only 8 days, though. So it was an around the world trip. So we started in Kenya, then we went to India, and then we went to China, and then we came back to the States.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So in order to do that trip, though, we had to be gone. I think it was a little less than a month.
Okay.
Yep.
So what year was it when you landed in China?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Have you been to China multiple times?
Yes.
Didn't know that.
3 times.
Wow. There you go.
Dang, I don't remember what year that first year was, honestly. I think it was like maybe 2018, 2019. No, 2018. Yeah, it was 2018. 2017, 2018, 2019. Because that's when I got stuck from COVID. Yes. 3 years back to back I went. Yeah.
Okay. So what was it like that first time? Because you've been like, China's been in your heart for years. You finally get in China. Then what?
It was very fast paced and we stayed. We did a lot of like street ministry.
How'd you do that though? When that's something that's, I mean, is it a persecuted thing?
Yes.
In China? Okay, so how'd you do it?
So we had to be very low key. That's why it was a fast trip. So most missionaries don't go for longer than 8 to 10 days because it's so dangerous. The only other people that I know that is probably the Lovelace family. They've been there for 18 months at a time.
The Bruces were also there for a time.
Yeah.
Too.
Oh yeah, true. So it's just not a normal thing for people to go, and a lot of people are terrified to go there to kind of do any kind of missional work at all, just because of what they have heard or whatever, and the horror stories that come with China. It's just most people don't want to go there, which is why I want to go there.
Yeah.
So I think that the first interactions that I had with the people were very challenging because it wasn't like what I thought, because we were in Beijing, but we weren't like, it was very low key. It was very by the airport, the hotel. It was that was it. It wasn't like what I thought. Where it really started shifting for me was when I was actually able to stay there longer. When I was able to start seeing the culture was when 2019 came.
Yeah.
And I went on that trip.
And that was just you by yourself?
So that was with me, with Shrin and Maria, which are two of my friends. Shrin is from Changsha.
Okay.
And
which is China.
And then Maria is from Ohio, but they got married. They actually, that's a really cool story. I won't go on that rant, but they got married through.
I'm sure we'll have them on at some point.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000,000%. And through ministry. And then so
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. How did you guys get connected?
Me and Shrin?
Yeah.
Me and Shrin were both at a conference.
Okay.
And he was one of the missionaries that was being asked to speak at the conference. It was a Southern Baptist convention, and I was invited to it. They were having Missions Day, where they were representing, I think it's like 50 countries or something like that. I can't remember. It was a lot. And they would have each table in each country would have food from that place and all of that. Well, he was one of the people that was asked to come and share a story. And I heard that he was really passionate about the 3 circles, because my friend Mike Reed was mentioning to him, to me. He's the one that invited me to the convention. And then when he shared, I was like, oh, that's the guy. I can tell that's the guy that Mike's been talking about, because the way he talks about ministry in the 3 circles, like he sounds like Mike.
Yeah.
And sure enough,
if you don't know what the 3 circles are, you have to Google it and watch a video of a presentation. It's a gospel presentation in these 3 circles. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's awesome. So after that, the end of the, ceremony or whatever it's called, I don't really know, but he ended up leaving and I couldn't find him. There was probably 1,000 people in the lobby. I couldn't get through the people. And then I just stood by China because I knew he was Chinese. I was like, my man's going to end up at the Chinese table. I know he will. Yeah. And sure enough, 15, 20 minutes later, I sat there and I had a plate of Chinese food, and he walked up and I was like, dude, I've been looking for you literally for like 20 minutes. Wow. And this whole time, but I've been standing here for 20 minutes, and he laughed and we just talked or whatever. And at that convention, he was like, he found out how passionate I was about China.
Yeah.
And how much I loved the people and how much I was praying for them and all of that. And he actually invited me to go to China with him in 2 months.
Wow.
So he said,
so you had to race for that.
Yes. And he said, I know that this is crazy, but I feel like right now in this moment that I am supposed to ask you. And if you know Shrin, he's a very Holy Spirit led guy, but he's also very, very wise.
Yeah.
And he's like, I feel like in this moment, I'm supposed to ask you to go to China with me. And I was like, 1,000%. I was like, 100%. Like, I'll go. And I was like, yeah, you're like maybe next summer. And he was like, no, literally in 2 months. Like, actually not even 2 months, a month and 3 weeks. Like, and I was like, oh. I was like, man, I don't know. I have to talk to Kim. I was working for her at the time. I was like, there's a lot of logistical things I would have to figure out. And he was like, well, just pray about it for 24 hours, fast and pray. And he's a pray and fast guy. Like,
yeah, we all should be.
Yes. And I was like, okay. And when I left there, I knew I was going 100%.
Well, before we talk about what it was like there, I think you've told me a story before of some miracles that happened in India.
Oh, yeah.
Let's touch on those.
Okay.
I'd like to hear that. Let's
so one of the miracles that happened in India was a blanket miracle. We pulled up to a Hindu village, and I remember me and Kim were talking. She's like, I really wish we had a gift. I really wish we had something to give them.
Yeah.
And we didn't have anything.
For many cultures, that's like necessary to show up with a gift.
Yeah, especially if you go to a Hindu culture, because Hindu village, because the guy that was actually with Suresh, the other co-host, he was actually stoned by this Hindu village, and Suresh was passing
not
by.
drug stoned, like actually with rocks.
Rock stoned, was being stoned, and Suresh was passing by and literally interjected and saved his life.
Wow.
And so he like grabbed him, threw him on his motorcycle, and they just like went. And so they became really close.
Yeah.
And so when we get to this Hindu village, he was like, I haven't been here since, all these things. And he was like, but Suresh is like, but it's fine because I'm building relationship with them. So we get there, we didn't have any gifts or anything like that. And we're like, dang it, man, that really stinks. And I remember I had my camera with me. And then I went ahead and got out of the car. We all get out of the van, the cars, whatever. And I'm in the back of Suresh's car. It's this little red kind of like IQ, like Scion IQ.
Yeah.
Super small. The back seat, like I'm completely like crumpled in the back.
Yeah.
And I get out and I remember I'm walking up and I was like, oh, dang, I forgot my camera. Or not my camera, my lens. And so I run back to the car to grab the lens and I open up the door in the back where I was sitting and it's full of blankets.
Wow.
And they weren't just blankets. They were perfectly folded blankets, raveled with string around them that had a bow tie, a perfect bow tie on top. And I was like, no flipping way, dude. I was like, there's no way.
Yeah.
So I grab them and here I am running to the people, like the team. And I'm like holding these giant bundles of blankets. And there was 200 people in the village and we had 200 blankets.
Say that again.
There's 200 people in the village and we had exactly 200 blankets in both ravels.
Praise God.
It was to the number of what we needed. And I have actually pictures of it. It was one of my,
but when you sit and think about it for a second, you are 6 foot, what?
5.
Okay, you're 6'5", and you're in the back of a tiny car. It's not possible for 200 perfectly wrapped blankets to have already been there.
Dude, they had to put the back seat down, and I had to sit halfway in the trunk because I was so big in this car. Like, this is
absolutely,
no way.
Undoubtedly a miracle.
Yeah,
unless someone snuck up from behind and started putting blankets on. It's just not.
There's another thing too that happened in India as well. Is I was with Kim Bogart and was this India or Africa? This was Africa.
Okay.
Kenya. So backtrack. Sorry, to the very beginning.
No, you're good.
First or second time that I went to Kenya, I remember Kim was like, hey, will you help me put out these tarps? We're going to do coloring time with the kids here at the school. And I was like, 100%. So I set all the tarps. I put all the coloring stuff out. And then, coloring books. I lied. Yeah. Packs of crayons. There's packs of crayons and little bags with like stickers and just like scissors and things like that, glue sticks. And we were going to give each kid one. And what we were told by the ministry is that they had a certain amount of kids. I think it was like 48 kids. I think it was.
Yeah.
And the kids come. And what happened is we start counting. One of the girls on the team, she starts counting. She was like, I think we have like 65 kids. And we're like, dang, well, we don't have enough stuff. Like, we just don't. Kim was like, it's fine. She was like, do you guys trust me? And I was like, 100%. And she was like, trust me. She was like, just start passing it out. And I was like, okay. So I'm walking around the thing and I just start passing it out. I look over, she's passing it out. The other girl that counted, she's passing it out, all those things. Mm-hmm. And we stop and she was like, cool. So she was like, let's get started. And I was like, well, we didn't have the other kids. And then she was like, does everybody have what they need? Do they have, the pack of crayons, the glue stick, the bag, all those things? And all the kids were like, yeah.
God just multiplied it.
So God multiplied it.
That's awesome.
So in the middle of all of it, which is really cool.
That is so great. Those are two like big multiplication miracles that are just undoubtable.
Yep. So we just kept passing out and God just kept giving more.
Dude, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Man, I am excited to hear more, and I'm excited to hear about China as well. So stay tuned for next episode. We're going to hear about how Brandon was stuck
Part 2, wow.
in China during COVID.
Yeah.
So Stay tuned for that.
All right, guys. You're awesome.
Amen.